You learned about interviewing from doing the show.
You've learned to never ask that question.
That's the question.
That's kind of the
You just
cardinal
never-
sin.
The cardinal sin is that question right
It's
there.
so great to be here for you, though.
Yeah,
for
yeah.
you to learn it in real time.
No, that's what I want. That's what I want to happen. You've been doing the podcast for years. You guys live busy lives. Why do you still do it? Like, is it that fun? Or, like, why do you do the podcast?
Dave, go ahead.
Okay, we entered into an agreement and years ago, and it said we had to do it for 6 years. And
Is that
both
true?
Of us, no. No, we actually
That
talk
could be
about
true. I
it.
don't
Could be
know.
true. Yeah. You'll never know. We actually talk about this a lot. We it's just really. I mean, this sounds really cheesy. It's really fun. And I think we both get to talk to, I mean, some of the ones that come to top of mind, like, I can't think of another reason that I would ever have a conversation with, like, Bruce Hornsby. I mean, I hope that we would meet in the musical world somewhere, but, or Matthew McConaughey, or, like, Kirk Herbstreit, or, there's just so many guests we have on that I'm like, I love that there's a venue for me to sit and have a conversation, John and I, with somebody that probably out in the natural world we may not ever come in contact with. And then too, selfishly, which we talk a lot about, is that we just both learn so much. You get, it feels like one or two times in every conversation, somebody will say something that I'm like, oh, that's a really interesting thought, especially as we call them, like, the specialists that we have on, like people who kind of specialize in either therapy or counseling or have written books on child development or something. Those are like, it feels like you're just, drinking from a fire hydrant in some of those, because there's just so much great information. But so I think it's a combination of selfish that we learn things, and then two, that we just really enjoy it. Like, and two, it's not, I mean, candidly, it's not a ton of work to do. We have a really great producer, Jason, who helps. And so I think if it was even a little more of a job.
I mean, honestly, if we didn't have Jason, I'm not sure
we wouldn't do it.
We would just be making recordings and, like, emailing them out,
throwing
to
hard drives into the yard, hoping that some.
What have you learned about interviewing from doing the show? Because you have to look back. You have to feel like you've become better.
We've learned to never ask
my
that
gosh.
question.
That's the question.
That's kind of the
You just
cardinal
never-
sin.
The cardinal sin is that question right
It's
there.
so great to be here for you, though.
Yeah,
for
yeah.
you to learn it in real time.
No, that's what I want. That's what I want to happen. I'm trying to but I start my podcast in 2020 also.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Well, this isn't really about me, but
Hey, we can be.
it can we make it about me?
You're sitting with
You
interviewers.
just showed us that it can be about you.
You're sitting with two
Wait.
professional interviewers, and we can turn the tables without you even knowing.
Enough about me though. Tell me more about what you guys think of me.
Okay, yeah. So far, it's been great. I mean, starting with Aerosmith and Spin Doctors earlier.
Yeah.
I mean, I think something that, a couple things I would say that I feel like I've
Is he
learned.
doing too much talking? Do you think?
This
Do you
well,
think-
this is
kind of how it goes.
Should John be saying?
about to say.
I just want to be sure that that Dave Barnes is not doing too much of the
started
talking.
talking, honest to God,
No,
I went,
keep
"Why
going.
are
It's
you
on.
answering
It's
this?
fine.
Just let John. No, you go, John.
No, Dave, you really feel like you're on a roll.
Honestly, like, I think the two of us, because of what you just witnessed, have completely different paths to learning. You know what I mean? With the interview. Because I have to learn, I mean, truthfully, in all seriousness, a huge part of our podcast is Dave Barnes being Dave Barnes and being hilarious and being, funny and all that. And that's a big part of the vibe of the podcast. And so early on, I really had to be thoughtful about, like, the cardinal sin that I could commit is, like, I'm going to jump in and try to be Dave Barnes 2.0. That would be the worst. That's just not me. I cannot. This is as high octane as I can go right now. This is my, and I'm even slowing down in real time. So I think for me, I'm like, okay, I personally, once the interview starts, I kind of want to feel like I've already contributed. So Dave and I will get together beforehand and sit for like an hour, and we'll bring all of our questions that we have. And so by that time, I want to feel like if they have a book, like I've read a good portion of their book, if not the whole thing, or like if they've got music, I've listened to it, and I've put together some thoughts. So by the time we get to the interview, I want to feel like, okay, I've written down some good questions that we're going to use, whether I ask them or Dave asks them. And that to me kind of sets me at ease. And then I can feel like I don't need to prove myself or whatever. And then it's just kind of, it's taken some time for me to just kind of calm down and not feel like I need to say anything. But then just like, if I have a question that I'm in real time wanting to ask, I can ask it. But it's a lot less busy in my head now than it was that first interview. It was tough for me to find my footing early on.
And I think the thing, this from doing interviews, we joked about the cardinal sins, but John and I last week were talking about this exact thing. Like, it's really hard. I think really hard. That's not hard. Making railroads is hard. This is not hard. But one of the hard things about it is you just actually alluded to this. Like, you want to relate to your guests. The hard thing about relating to them is not over talking when you relate. In other words, like, people that know you, they know you really well. Listen to this, because you've said a lot about yourself over these last 4 or 5 years. Like, they know pretty much the ins and outs.
What's funny though? I actually don't think I have.
You haven't? Okay.
Like, I don't think I. In fact, someone said to me that they wish I spoke more about myself.
Okay, well then you do it well. Then you're actually
maybe
gonna make
I don't
my
know.
Point. But I think something that John and I talk about is something I really struggle with. Is I think it's a pretty natural human thing to, if we're interviewing you and you go, oh well, I went to Mississippi State, I would then go, oh my gosh, I'm from Mississippi, and so I'd want to make a connection point. But in that, you don't want to over make that connection point, because one, people would go, oh, we already know that I didn't go to Mississippi State, but like Dave went, why is he saying this again? Because they don't realize in the real moment, I'm just trying to connect and make us all comfortable and have a connection. And so you have to be careful to not sort of like say the same things over and over in every interview for a connection point, because your listeners can go like, why are we talking about this again?
We know. I always like the Larry King quote, which is, I has no place in an interview.
There you go. And that is really hard. I mean, ironically, interview, the word is started
with an I.
And so then one could say
he wasn't great at spelling.
There's no
though. He was notoriously a bad speller.
Yeah, that was exactly.
It was a double E.
He would say ENT because it's an interview.
Right.
It's entertaining. I digress.
But you know what's interesting about that what you said? Like, two things. One, it's interesting, the things that we have our eye on often are the things that we do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You have your eye on what? Like in an interview?
Like Dave has his eye on, let's not talk about ourselves too much and insert ourselves in the conversation. But that is something that Dave, part of your personality is sharing, and you're a great conversationalist. And a big part of that is, not in a bad way, but talking about yourself and relating with people in that way. It's interesting what we have our eye on just in general. It oftentimes is a thing that we do, and we're on some level conscious of it, but sometimes it's like sort of like a superpower that we have.
Well, John, it's funny because John's superpower is he will come in with questions that are so unbelievably well laid out. I always joke, John is always, if you listen to Dadville and the guest says, God, what a great question, it's always a John question.
It's not always
100% a John question. But my favorite thing that John does is like, and he'll read them because they're great. And I'm like, I read the question, don't skip. Because, it's usually about 3 or 4 sentences because he sort of builds to the question. Yeah. But he will always joke later that, like, at about the third sentence, he's like, just shut up. This is taking forever. Get to the question. Where I'm like, no, like, this is great. And so his insecurity, which is his superpower, is like, oh, God, this is taking way too long.
I feel like I talk too much.
How'd you guys get Nate Bargatze on? Was that through a dad network?
We have some pictures.
You have pictures on him.
Yeah. We've already said too much.
Yeah.
Right.
Can we cut this out?
Even that was promised that it would never get brought up. But is there like a dad circle? Because isn't he a local dad?
He's
basically?
a local dad. He's
like,
an LD.
Do you have a connection with him through that, or like how'd you get him on?
I don't remember.
Yeah, I just emailed his wife. Now, granted, this was 2
years ago.
Yeah,
so maybe he wasn't at the
he was in his
success.
ascendancy, but not where he is now. We actually have a million mutual friends. And I would maybe even go so bold as to say that I know him now. Like, we've been in a few times where whatever. But at the time, his wife, so one of our dearest friends is his stylist, and has been forever. And so I was kind of like, you think she'd do this or he'd do this? And she said, maybe, but his wife is the one to kind of go through to get to him because she was at the time booking his stuff. And so I'd emailed her a couple of times, and she kept saying, like, I think this would be great. It's not the time. And then I think at some point she just was like, hey, like, we can do it. And I'm going to say that, and then Jason's going to be like, no, I booked it. But I'm pretty sure
have
she
no
and I
idea.
were emailing at least initially.